Good morning, Koyo.
Always a pleasure to have you. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, it's become a carousel now. Everybody comes along and sacks people and brings their own in. Honestly, how do we get out of this? We thought we had broken the cycle. President Atta Mills seemed to have done that. But we're back into it. What's the cure?
Um, the cure is for us to grow up, or better still, for our leaders to grow up. And I don't mean it flippantly. Um, Nations are governed by laws, but a lot of time by conventions and practices that have been developed over time. Okay, leaders must have a certain level of. Uh, I'm not sure. I don't want to use a word that sounds uh, negative, but
Oh, say how you
people
feel.
must be. Well, let me just make the point. See, over time, we develop certain ways of doing things. Clearly, across the world, those things have been challenged. For instance, as you see in the US, okay, there are things that presidents didn't do. Okay, today you see presidents selling T-shirts and coins. So we are in a different age altogether. But the fundamental point is that there are some things that you don't do. There is politics, there's economics, there's morality, there is law. Okay, and all these things are broken when you see that you are leaving office for sure, and then you just load the system with a burden that you expect somebody to come and deal with. Look, people think that, oh, it's starting. I am very sympathetic. Unemployment is not an easy thing, but it doesn't help anybody when we do that. Let me explain. When you give somebody an employment which is not productive, you hurt the person, you hurt the economy. You hurt the person because you go and put them there, they sit down for 8 hours. And if it's a really correct, I don't, if you hurt the soul of the person by just letting them sit there and do nothing, it has all kinds of effects on that person. It's better that the person be doing something productive or find something else to do that brings them fulfillment instead of just sit down. You hurt the whole economy by paying that person for no productivity. You just create inflation. All right? And maybe that person should be retrained to do something more useful. Okay, so it helps nobody when we do those things. And then the person ultimately gets sacked or something like that. Okay, so we should really stop doing that. If you look at the politics, it's just not right when somebody has won an election fair and square, based on articulating a certain set of policies that you should give them space to operate. They should, operationalize what they have come to do for which they were voted into power. You don't put them in a certain situation where you lump them with this kind of burden and then they have to come and find a way to resolve it. The law of it is simple. Anybody on probation can resign without notice. In the same way, they can be sacked without notice. So if you just put people into a place and then you leave them for the next government, if they have not gone through the proper process, they can be removed. In the same way, they can also remove themselves. My own view is that if we cannot respect ourselves or conduct ourselves properly, then we should put this in the Transitional Act, make it a law, that once the election is determined, or even if you like a month or so to the election, no major recruitments may be made. What it means is that if any recruitment will be made, it must be justified. And if we're in a transition period, the outgoing government should not make any recruitment except it's an emergency recruitment, and that must be made with the full knowledge and agreement of the incoming government. It is just not right to load the system with people that you did not employ when you were there and expect that somebody will come and deal with them.
But Kofi, we've talked about government being a continuous process, and for instance, I've heard Egbert Fable on Asempa FM make the point that there were people who came for interviews, they were going through the processes, and so there, at the time, the Public Services Commission, I mean, because they are already in 2024, they needed these people for 2025. They had gone through the interview processes. And so these people, they had the authorization to employ them. So he signs letters that says your employment takes effect from 1st January 2025 because he was still CEO. Should there be a problem with that?
No. But if they were processed properly, it means there is a justification for having them. In other words, whoever employed them at that time can give you good reasons. Usually should be written. We have this job opening. Here's the value of the job. If we don't have somebody filling that job, this is what's likely to happen to the organization. Therefore, we have hired this person who's going to take over at this time. Anybody else who takes over understands the rationale for that. Those ones, no good manager will sack them. And if they are sacked, after going through probation, after going through the necessary processes, they have a legal record and they can take, the person who is sacking them on. Okay, what we are saying is not this time. Okay, and we've seen people come and justify it, whatever. Listen, if you are going to go out of office, even if you haven't lost the election, your last month or so, or last 3 months, is that when you do major things? The NEIP thing that we are seeing, it reflects extremely bad management.
Why?
That you sit around, you cannot focus anything beyond 3 months, and then in the last minute, you pile in so many things, come back and say, oh, we think we made a mistake, and because of that, we have to put them. If I were your boss, I would sack you. If the new government coming in is giving something like what we are seeing from the NEI, and I were inside, I would sack everybody who was responsible for that. Because they have advertised they are bad managers. It is disqualifying for you to make such a monumental mistake in management that causes such catastrophic effect. So for me, these last minute things, you can say they are lawful, but those who do them and create problems simply reveal that they are bad managers. And at the end of the day, if a new manager takes over and there is not sufficient justification that makes them willing to keep those employees, they have a right to find a legal way to let them go. And the legal way is not suspension.
Now, since you're a management consultant too, let me just ask you this. Because in the case of the NEIP that discussions with the past CEO, he says they actually had temporary staff, and some of they've been working with them. I'm surprised because I look at the labor law. It talks about a temporary staff that works 6 months or more with the same employer becomes treated as a permanent staff under this law. And some of them have been there. The question is, how does an entity of that nature run just with temporary staff?
Two things. It could mean that entity, being a state entity, didn't have the clearance to make those staff permanent. That also reflects weakness in management negotiating with authorities. If those jobs had value, it would be easy for you to justify them. If they didn't have value, it would be difficult for you to justify them. If you were filling the spaces with bodies just to create false employment, then you are dealing in a different area. Okay? Now, that area is likely to be the area of politics. You are just putting people in employment and paying them for political reasons. You should go with them. So if those jobs were proper and had value, then you should make the case so that they'll be carried on. Now, under no circumstance must a letter like that be written by competent management. And sometimes, because these are in the area of politics, they don't want to subject themselves to proper management size. But I do not want to see that. That NEIP letter, again, reveals catastrophic management and total lack of planning. If they want to explain it in politics, then this is what they must do. When you make those political decisions, you don't have a right to lay it on your successor. So they should go with them. But if you write a letter like this, suspending a whole troop of people, you have advertised that you are not capable of running that institution. If any of the people who made those decisions are there, they should all be fired. Every one of them. The law does not allow you to do that. And in fact, when you do that, you put the institution in jeopardy. Okay? Depending on the details of what has happened, some of these people can take a class action and then you end up paying a huge sum of money in compensation. So what is it about loading a place with people that you didn't need? Okay, and then now you have to suspend them. Why did you have to do it in the first place? That's why I'm saying something to the effect that we need to grow up in the way we manage things. All right?
Right.
So that these things don't become necessary.
Kofi, let me read this to you. It's from the memo, the NEIP memo. It said, following extensive follow-ups to resolve the issues related to the employment of existing staff, it has been determined that the complexity and legal implications of these issues prevent us from using operational funds to pay monthly staff allowances. Management has been instructed to adhere strictly to due process in regularizing staff employment matters to prevent further legal complication. What legal complication could they be talking about? What could they legally have done wrong by paying staff with their funds?
So they have put together a lot of English to simply advertise their incompetence. And it's interesting that some of the things they are saying are actually counter. You are exposing yourself to even worse legal problems by doing what you've done because it's unlawful in Act 651 in Ghana's labor law. Ghana's labor law does not allow this. And then when you talk about following complexities and whatever it is, you simply told us, I didn't know what I was doing. I am disqualified by my conduct because this conduct has created this huge problem, which is a problem for me. It is a problem for you, the employee, and it's a problem for the state. And to say that it is to avoid legal complexity, this creates legal complexity. Our law does not allow you to suspend people without cause. So what they've done exposes them to legal liability. And what do they mean by complexity? When you were employing the people, what was the thinking? Again, that is why I say management should be reviewed by its judgment and actions, which should be recorded. So if this were a different arrangement, those people who did that will be asked to justify their actions. Now, if you even bring it into a space of politics, and when I say that, I don't mean politics is an excuse for bad management, but we know what we are dealing with. If you hire people without proper reason, just for the sake of filling the space with bodies and paying your political cronies and whatever, food soldiers or whatever, go with them. Don't create a problem like this and say, I'm suspending them. Our labor law does not allow suspension, dismissal, or any kind of punishment of properly employed persons without cause. If you do that, you expose the institution to legal jeopardy. So this letter is proof that the people who were running that institution were not fit for purpose. Maybe it is also an indication that that whole institution does not have to exist.
I mean, we'll get to that whole institution, but the other point is that these were temporary workers, staff. So legally, can't the institution say, well, since you're temporary staff, go home?
Temporary staff mean they have a contract which terminates at a certain point. If the managers then knew what they were doing, all temporary staff will have a contract they say that they are hiring you for this job, which is not a permanent job. So you are going to come in and work from here to here. In other words, you start at this day and you end at this day. So there must be a sunset to every temporary employment contract. If they didn't do that, it's a management failure. If they are temporary staff, you don't need to suspend them. You appoint them for the job which you have assessed, so that when the job is over, they go with the job. So is it that the job they came to do is over, but you are still keeping them? It means you made a mistake in assessing the length that you need them for. Even that, every contract has ways of getting out of it. Okay? So there are proper ways of doing things. Now, if they did this properly, it shouldn't hit this level of confusion. So temporary staff is easy. You are not permanent. You work for a while and then you go. Why is that not clear? Why is it that we have to come to a point where we are suspending temporary staff? Again, it reveals management incompetence.
And in this case, you say that these people could take the agency on?
Oh, yes. Our employment laws in Ghana, I tell people all the time that we had socialist tendencies when we were making these laws. Started from Kwame Nkrumah's time. And some of them, you'll be amazed. They are extremely protective of workers. Now, people without the socialist tendencies and being extremely protective of workers, which I support, our laws particularly go an extra mile to make sure that employers will not take undue advantage of employees. So even temporary staff have rights. In fact, our law provides that if you hire somebody and you don't give the person any contract at all, if they work beyond 6 months, they will assume the rights of permanent employees.
Yeah.
So temporary staff, when you're giving them contracts, to the expect that their engagement will end at a certain time. That makes them weak. So even their protections and everything are stronger. You have to be strict about what you've called them for, what they are going to do, and then when the time comes, they leave. So, if you misconduct yourself this way, to their detriment, the person already is temporary, and then you are letting them go before their time, and then under these circumstances, they definitely have recourse to law. And I believe that the judges will be sympathetic to them, especially when you display such terrible management.
If that's we're talking to Kofi Bentil. He's a lawyer. He's the vice president of Imani Africa, and he also wears the occasional hat of management consultant. So he certainly knows his onions. Best person to talk to about this matter. Now, Kofi, you've made the point that really we should start moving away from this mass employment at the last minute practice. You've suggested that, in fact, it should be only essential employment that should be permitted during a transition period, which means the incoming government would, basically have a say in whether or not the employment is necessary, right? Now, there are some who suggest that, well, when John Mahama was voted out in 2016, he made one last-minute appointment, which ended up being a wonderful asset for Ghana, Daniel Domelevo, the Auditor General. And if we were to start a practice where the incoming government has the final say on whether some employment should be allowed or not, then we may never have opportunities like the one John Mahama took advantage of to put people in place who will serve as a check on incoming governments. What do you say to that?
I say that Daniel Domelevo was an exceptional case. And I remember very clearly, when he was appointed, a number of us, including myself, raised concern. But we were quickly told, no, hold on. For some of these positions, in fact, it may be useful even in law that you appoint people who are not known to be together with the incoming party. So, for instance, in some committees of parliament, the minorities have to be chaired. So there were all kinds of these discussions going on. And you realize that the fury died down. And it turned out that Daniel Domelevo was a great asset. You don't raise an exception to the rule. You don't make an outlier the main feature. When you have a situation which is exceptional, you don't assume it is normal. I would always agree, especially based on the experience of Daniel Domelevo, that institutions that are supposed to be a check on government should not be headed by people who are known to be in good, to be together with the government. That means, I don't want to say in their party, but you understand what I'm saying.
Sure.
So, in the case of Daniel Nobolo, I was one person who raised for a concern. But guess what? Later down the line, I was one of the lawyers who defended Nobolo. So that is an exception. And in fact, the learning from that is what we should bring into any constitutional review, or if we need to take a new law. That institutions that check government, TRAD, EOCO, OXP, Auditor General, IG, whatever, should not be left to that executive to appoint. Okay, so those are clearly special cases. Government, yes, is in a continuum. We are not saying if you are going out of office, under no circumstance must you make an employment. But we are saying when you know you are leaving and you know somebody is coming and you know the person who is coming, it cannot be right that you take these decisions that will be a burden on that person who you sit at a table with in a transition, and not let the person have a say in that. Especially when in a few weeks, that person is going to have every power to disrupt what you have done. Where's the common sense of that? So look, if we cannot act like adults in this matter, let us make a law. And again, the law says, unless it is an emergency, there should be no recruitment. We survived for 8 years. Why can't we survive for another 1 month without that office being filled? If it is, however, an emergency, bring the incoming government into the decision so that when you leave, they will not be compelled to get rid of the person you have just appointed.
But I mean, talking about unless it's an emergency, Kofi, we know how what was supposed to be an emergency in procurement has become the norm. How sure are you that this is not going to be the norm too?
Well, that is why we have adversarial arrangements in our politics. We have a tendency to look at a law and then twist it to fit whatever decision we want to make. But in an adversarial arrangement, yeah, there's somebody playing the thing against you. So they'll correct you. At least they'll oppose you. Or they'll resist you. So in this particular arrangement, it works. Okay. If you appoint somebody for your own interest, not for the national interest per se, your adversary will come and reverse it. That's what we are seeing. It will create even more problems for everybody. So in this particular situation, that check will work. And we are saying, if you have to do it, it is not likely that the next person is going to come and remove that person. Look, in the case of Daniel Domolomo, for instance, clearly we saw what went on. Ultimately, they removed him, but all of us were against. So, in an adversarial arrangement, when you do things properly, as was done in the case of Daniel Domolomo, it's likely to be durable. So, let us put it in the law. Again, if our leaders cannot be circumspect about these things, the adversarial arrangement will take care of it, which is why I don't think it is wrong for the present government to get rid of them, to remove them. Or I'm sympathetic to the persons involved, but indeed, we should allow the new government to do what it has to do, so that in future when we are going to say something about them, good or bad, we know they took the decisions and they are responsible for what they did.
Yeah, but Kofi,
so we have a structure which allows that.
Kofi, are we not where we are today because of decisions of the past? And if we continue, is that not going to be a reality going forward? Because reference is made to 2017. Now we are in 2025, and people say, oh, but in 2017, that's what happened. No more father for all.
So see, we need to learn, we need to grow, we need to get better. I have argued that our constitution allows good leaders to be good, and it allows bad leaders to be bad. And my view is that if we could trust that our leaders will be virtuous and do what is right, we will not need to amend our constitution. I make the point that President Kufuor appointed ministers from outside his party. So even the winner takes all thing is not entirely true. That is why President Mills was able to leave people in place after they had been appointed by the previous government. It is if the leader decides to do so that he can do so. But our constitution also allows people to do what they want to do anyway. So what we need to do now is to make the assumption that we are not going to have virtuous leaders, people who are going to do things properly. We should make the assumption that our leaders will use the constitution to their benefit, whether it is good for the country or not. To that extent, we should tighten it. We should make sure that the constitution does not allow a bad person to do bad things, because we've had enough examples of that. It is not wise for us to assume that our leaders are virtuous and they will do only good things. We should tighten the constitution to make sure they can do that. That comes back again to the issue of law. If we're going to assume that our leaders will exercise good sense and fairness and not make appointments which are not emergency, then the constitution is enough. But we have had experience where they don't exercise good sense and fairness. So they always abuse the constitution and then appoint people. And if you don't have a person like President Mills who exercise good sense and fairness and maybe leave those people there, you are going to have these kinds of problems. Which is again why I say, let's put it in law. You cannot hire people after the election. If you have to do it, it has to be an emergency. And the incoming government must be in full knowledge and must sign off on it.
And talking about law also, Kofi, we've seen, for instance, how do I put it? We've seen the Supreme Court ruling post-2017, where it indicated that you cannot. So, for instance, when there's a change in government, CEOs' positions are not like board positions. However, in 2025, these appointments are being terminated. I mean, because there's a provision in your appointment letter that allows the employer to terminate it. And so, while the Supreme Court says the CEOs do not have to leave with a departing president, the appointments are being terminated and another one appointed.
Yes, some of them are clearly skirting the law. But you have a situation where some of these SOEs are wholly owned by government, which makes them a sole shareholder. The law still does not allow them to do those terminations. It is the board that has to appoint and terminate a CEO. But the board also acts according to what the shareholders want. So when you have a sole shareholder, it is almost clear that the sole shareholder wants that CEO change. But if you ask me, I'll say, did you go through the process? Have an AGM, have the directors take the instructions, have the directors make those decisions. It comes back to whether we should even be having these SOEs or not.
Right.
Some of them are racking a series of losses. They are taking thousands of dollars in monthly salary, and we are not sure what their value is. So it goes down to that fundamental issue. If, however, we are going to have SOEs, who are going to be a net positive to the country, I think the least we should do is to force the government to just obey the rules, even if they are a single shareholder. A lot of that has to do with the holders of those offices. The Honorable Samuel Jeto took this matter to court at a point, and he won. You see, constitutions don't implement themselves. It takes people to enforce them against government. That's why some of us go to court, we raise issues, and we win in court, and then things change. Governments will likely do what is convenient for them, okay? And we citizens have to do what is proper for the country at large. So, these CEOs who are being dismissed, people think the SIC MD did the wrong thing. In a sense, yes, you may say, well, there's a new king in town, the person says they don't want you. But I wanted her to test the law, because these things streamline things for everybody. Even if SIC is wholly owned, there must have been a process by which an MD will be removed or retained. I don't have any quarrel with the new government wanting its people in place, but do it properly. So I think we'll see more of these things. For me, it's very simple. If you want a different person in place, go through the proper process. And if you go through the proper process, remove the person and install your own person, that is fine. If they are making profit, none of us will complain. If they're not making profit, sooner down the line, we will all ask that all these SOEs that are making losses be scrapped. Because these losses really are people's plans working. That money that is set to be a loss, which all of us pay in our taxes, is in somebody's pocket. So one day, we will all get up and have all of them removed. And then we won't even have these problems of who is MD or who is not, and how much they are taking for what they are doing or not doing.
Right. Now, Kofi, you've mentioned that you actually support the removal of these people who were appointed at the last minute, according to this government. First of all, let me assume that also means you were in support of the Akufo-Addo government doing the same in 2017.
I was in support of the proper removal of improperly placed persons during the Akufo-Addo regime. I wasn't happy with the effect on those people and how it looked. It was quite untidy.
Right. Okay.
And so, I am in support of this government also removing the people that Akufo-Addo put in place at the wrong time and clearly for wrong reasons.
Very well. Now, I want to, I don't know, maybe call it playing devil's advocate or whatever, but I want to follow the line of thought through to its logical conclusion. So, if these people are not removed, what harm does it do to this government?
Number one, a government comes into power by articulating its vision in a manifesto. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. When you pack the system with your people, so to say, you hinder him or the government from operationalizing their ideas.
In what way?
Pardon?
In what way?
Yes, I'm explaining. Theoretically, you can be blamed for putting people in place who will not be fit for purpose, just as a way to obstruct your opponent. But that's one matter. Secondly, I said earlier, if the job has value and needs to be filled, there will be sufficient justification for it to make it so that the person who is coming would even want to keep that person so that that job will be filled. So, for instance, if your office were vacant, there will be a value to filling it. And if somebody filled it, the next person is not likely to remove whoever has been used or whoever has been put in that place, because doing that would affect the institution. In this case, it seems to us that those jobs that were created out of the air did not really have value, and that the removal of the people would not create any problem. Okay. On the other hand, paying them will be a burden that is not provided for. And in many cases, we are seeing temporary staff and whatever it is. It doesn't seem like these people even go to job or work, and they actually have work to do. So there are so many reasons why somebody will say, look, we cannot continue with this.
Right.
So let the new government come in, let them operationalize their own manifesto or whatever it is. Do not burden or saddle them with your decisions, which they now have to come and deal with.
Right.
If there is a way in law that they can properly set these people down, I think it's proper that we do that.
Right.
Just back to the issue, we should avoid these things going forward. What do we lose if we allow the new government to come in and fill those positions? The people they will hire are Ghanaians anyway. And if you were in a place where we wanted you to continue to fill the place with people you want to fill, we would have voted you into power. So when people win elections, let's give them the space.
Well, I mean, Kofi, you did say that, you think that some of these positions were not necessary to be filled anyway. So why would you then expect the new government to fill them with their own people? Why wouldn't you expect these positions to then remain vacant for the next 4 years because they needn't have been filled?
I don't expect the new government to fill these positions because we are working with something that they don't need to be filled. But there's a different assumption. The other assumption is, if those jobs or positions had value and they needed to be filled, why haven't they been filled for 8 years or for 4 years? And why do you need to fill them over the transition period? Indeed, if that position needs to be filled and you have come this far without filling it, leave it there. Let the new person come and fill it. All right? Because indeed, the new person will need people that they have confidence in to prosecute their agenda, which hopefully will be a national agenda. Whichever way it is, they have won an election. So if there's a vacancy, they have simply been given the mandate to come, fill it, and then prosecute on the agenda. So leave it for them. Okay, these are conventions, these are common sense things that we hope over time our leaders will come to appreciate, because it works both ways. Okay, if you don't do that, in fact, you can appoint somebody who is properly appointed, the job needs to be filled, etc. But the new government will come and say, I am not confident, or I'm not comfortable, or I'm not happy working with you. It happens. In the US right now, it is happening. Okay, very qualified people are being removed because the president says, I'm not comfortable with it. Not all of that is purely legal. But leaders have some rights and they have some powers and they can deploy them. To a certain minimum extent, even that should be allowed. It comes down to the same thing. When somebody wins an election, the person is picked by the generality of the population. It means we want that person to do what is in their mind, what they have told us they will do. And they cannot do it with people they don't trust. So even if the job is proper and has to be filled, if it has been open till the election and somebody else has won, leave it to that person to come and fill that job.
Okay. I want to say thank you to you, Kofi Bentil, lawyer and Vice President of Imani Africa, for your time with us this morning. We appreciate the enlightenment.
Thank you.